As winter approaches, the nights are getting darker, and that is why nighttime photography has become a great interest to me recently. In today's video, I'm going to show you in two very simple steps how you can produce nighttime photographs that look something like this. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel, and as I said, today's topic of discussion is going to be nighttime photography. Now, as I said, winter is getting closer and closer, which means the nights are getting darker and darker much earlier. So nighttime photography has been something that I've been interested in more recently, and I'm going to be sharing with you my tips on how you can achieve really decent looking photos at nighttime. So nighttime photography, how you can optimize your image. Basically, I'm going to show you the settings in camera, what you actually use, how you adjust things to get the perfect shot, and then I'm going to go into Lightroom and show you how you edit the photos. If you are new around here and you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe and check out my other videos. And if at any point during this video you do find it useful, be sure to let me know by slapping a like on the video. Also, comment down below any questions you may have or any thoughts. Also, go and check out my social media accounts. There will be links on screen right now and in the description. But let's jump into the nighttime photography video. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to go through the settings in camera. There's only really 3 settings that are really important. Other things can get changed depending on what you want to achieve with your photo. And then obviously we're going to go onto Lightroom and edit the photo, because that is where the photo really comes to life. But you're not going to get to Lightroom if you don't take a decent photo. So obviously we're going to start off with the camera settings, and there's only, as I said, 3 settings that you really need to focus on, which is your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed. Now, if you adjust them 3 settings accordingly to the right settings, then you will obviously optimize that image. I didn't know how to do that at first. I'm not gonna lie, I'll hold my hands up. I was a beginner. Everyone starts somewhere, don't they? And I just shot with similar settings to what I usually shoot with, and I realized that the results were absolutely horrendous. So I obviously done my research, and I realized what settings you needed to change and roughly what values you want to change it to achieve certain looks. Okay, so we'll start off with the easiest one, which is ISO. Basically, you want the ISO to be the lowest it can possibly be, so preferably 100 if your camera can go down to that, maybe lower. I set mine at 200, that is the lowest it will go when taking photos. So you just want the ISO to be as low as possible to reduce any noise, potential noise that you can get within the image. You don't want that grainy look. You want it to be very smooth, and lowering the ISO to as low as possible is the way to achieve that. Okay, so the next setting is shutter speed. Now, shutter speed is basically how long your camera's sensor stays open, so how much light it's lets in for that period of time. So it's not the amount of light, it's just how long it allows light to come in. Obviously, longer shutter speeds allow more light in, and that's where you can get some really cool effects where there's like lots of light moving. Obviously, one of them photos at the beginning that I did show you had that at St. George's Hall in Liverpool. There was like the effect of where cars have been, but you can't actually see the cars. That's because I had a long shutter speed, and obviously cars drove past during the time the shutter speed was open, you know, during the time the sensor was open, and obviously the light was captured in that image. And then obviously if you have a very short shutter speed, you're not going to allow light through for that very long, so it'll just be much more of a still image rather than anything being dynamic within the photo. Now, how does that affect nighttime photography? Well, the longer the shutter speed is, the longer your sensor is open, the more light it allows in. So you're obviously going to be in dark situations. The sky is going to be very dark. There may just be a few buildings lit up. So the longer that shutter speed, the more light that's going to be allowed in, which will obviously brighten your image. If you just take a picture with a very short shutter speed, it's a very short amount of time that your sensor is allowing light in, it's going to be a very dark picture, and it's going to be very difficult to work with in Lightroom or in any editing program. So the longer the shutter speed, the better for nighttime photography. Okay, and the final setting is your aperture setting, which is obviously your f-stop value. So you'll have an f value within your camera, and basically that is the area that your sensor is going to allow light in, so the area of light that is actually taken in. So obviously, the smaller the f value, the more relative light that your camera is going to take in. So if you have a very low f-stop value, then you're going to be taking in the maximum amount of light possible. Whereas if you have the highest f-stop value that your camera goes to, you'll be taking in the minimum amount of light. So when you're shooting nighttime photography, you probably think, oh, have a low f-stop value to bring in all this light. Not necessarily true, because it actually allows in too much light if you go to the lowest settings. So what I tend to do with my f-stop value, I actually just tend to go up, take a picture, see what it looks like, go up again if I need to, take a picture, and keep doing that process until you find the right balance. You'll be able to see yourself when you're viewing your image after you've just took it, the preview, whether it's actually right. You'll be able to tell straight away. So that setting is pretty much personal preference, but you will be able to get a feel for what is right just by looking at your image when you're practicing. When you first set up, that's what I'll do. I'll first set up, I'll get the tripod out, get your camera out, and I'll just take pictures until you actually realize what setting is right. Even if it's not a picture that you want to keep, just maybe get the background in and you'll get a good feel for it, and then you can obviously take the photo that you want to take. So that setting is just one that you tend to play around with until you actually find the right setting for you. Okay, and one final camera setting that I didn't actually mention, you always want to shoot RAW and JPEG, or RAW, but I tend to go RAW and JPEG just for the purpose that I might need it for a video, so I'd need JPEG, but always try to shoot RAW because it gives you a lot more data to work with in terms of the photo when you're in Lightroom. It gives you a lot more stuff that isn't processed. If you shoot JPEG, then everything's already pre-processed, so you can't actually edit the photo as much. Whereas if you shoot RAW, you can do a lot more editing, and then if you need to export it in JPEG, then at least you've literally optimized the image to the best of your ability, and it's not actually already been decreased before you even start the editing process. So always shoot RAW and JPEG, or just RAW if you want to, but RAW and JPEG is the personal preference for me. Let's head over to Lightroom right now to see what we can do with a nighttime photograph. Okay, so as you can see right now, we are in Lightroom, and this is just a photo I took the other day in Liverpool city centre on the Albert Dock on the waterfront. And I'm basically just going to show you some of the settings that I would tweak to actually get this image fully optimized. And it really is a simple process, probably 5 minutes at most, but let's just jump into editing the photo. Okay, so one of the cool things when you do take a photo as a raw image, you can really adjust the temperature quite significantly. Obviously, we're not going to go too insane with that, so we're just going to drop this down, because a lot of people tend to go for a warmer look, but I'm not that type of person. I tend to think, well, if it's a nighttime photograph, it's not going to be warm, is it? You're not like in a warm environment, so you just tend to actually have a cooler environment when it's a nighttime photograph. So I do actually bring the temperature ever so slightly down. Now, next thing we go on to is this section here. I'm actually going to leave the exposure as it is. That obviously differs depending on your photo. It may need to go up, it may need to go down, but for this photo in particular, I'm going to keep it where it is. But I'm going to bump the contrast up, because as you see, it's just going to make the differential between the bright parts and the dark parts a bit better. And we're actually going to drop the highlights right the way down, and obviously that's really took a lot of the light out of the photo, and you're probably thinking, why in the hell have you done that? But I'll come on to why in a minute, and you'll see exactly why. But obviously you want the brighter parts to be dropped, and then you want the darker parts to be bumped up. So obviously you're going to drop the highlights and bring up the shadows. Next, this is where it actually comes back into play. You're actually going to bump the whites back up to about 48, around that. So obviously you brought the majority of the light down, but in the specific areas that you want it to be bright, which is the buildings, in this case, you have brought that back up. So in terms of the blacks, we're just going to bump them down ever so slightly. And now you can see that there really is a contrast between the areas in the photo, which are the background, which I'd call it, which is the sky and the water. In this example, you can really see a nice reflection. And then obviously the buildings, which is the main focus point for this photo, the buildings and the road. And obviously you're probably thinking it's a bit too dark at this moment in time, but when we bump the clarity up to about 26, 25, 26, you just get a bit more brightness from that. Obviously we'll be working on the brightness in just a moment. This is not the overall finished picture. You're just going to bump the vibrance up to about 17, and then for saturation you're actually going to bump it down to about -10, and there's a reason why we're taking the saturation down, but I'll come to that in just a moment. Next up, you want to go to tone curve, and you basically always just want to try and create a bit of an S shape, but not too much of one. So you're literally just trying to create an S shape like that. That's pretty much decent for me, in my opinion. I think that looks pretty good. And obviously at this moment in time, the photo is still looking quite dark, but we will address that in a moment. Now, the reason that we actually made the temperature drop slightly, so a more cooler look, is because when you go to split toning, you're actually going to make it warmer in the highlights only. So if you go to highlights and then you select an orangey color around here, somewhere around there is pretty decent. If you just go to orange, then you're going to bring a bit more warmth to the photo in the highlights. So you're not actually affecting the shadows, which is obviously the darker part of the area. You're just affecting the road and the buildings, and you're bringing it up to give it a bit more of a warm feel. And obviously the outside areas have got that cooler temperature from the setting that we used before. Okay, so for detail, I'm just going to bump this up, noise reduction, to about 45, 46. I always do this just to make sure that there isn't too much noise. Then we're going to go to lens correction. And because my lens is actually built-in lens applied, so you click on that and it just tells you that it's automatically calibrated, so I don't actually have to change any settings for that. But if you do need to, you just go to default, you change it to custom, and then you find your own lens on there. Okay, next up is effects. We're just going to drop the amount to about 10, midpoint to about 25 to 30, around there somewhere, and then we're just going to bring up the feather to about 75. And that just gives a bit of an effect to the photo on the edges and kind of thing. It's not too significant, but it is actually something that you can do just to make your photo look a bit better. And then obviously I like that teal and orange look, so I'm just going to bump up the hue on the red primary to about 30, and then bring the hue down to about 30 as well for the blue primary to get that teal and orange look. And that photo is looking pretty decent now, in my opinion. And obviously you would have noticed I've missed out HSL, which is hue, saturation, luminance, but I'm not actually going to change that for this photo because I believe the colors actually look pretty decent as it is. It's a nighttime photo, so there's not a load of colors in this photo. There's quite a few, but it's mainly oranges and blues and reds from the cars. So obviously, if you have a photo with maybe a building and a bridge and all different kinds of colors, then maybe go into this tab. But I'm actually going to leave it as it is, and I'm just going to show you a before and after of the two photos right now, so you can see the difference that just editing this photo has made. Okay, so there's the before and after. As you can see, obviously the original image was pretty decent, but there was a bit too much exposure in mainly the road and the buildings, and I've just brought a bit more color and a bit more vibrance to the actual image itself. Obviously I've gone for a slight teal and orange look, with obviously the buildings with a bit of orange, and then obviously the street lamps with the obviously teal look. And I feel like this image looks 10 times, maybe 100 times better. Obviously I've really darken the sky and the waterfront, so you can't really see that. You can just see the reflection of the buildings in the background, and I just think this image looks a lot better already. And that is pretty much how you edit your nighttime photos. So that is all for this video. If you have found it useful at any point, be sure to let me know by leaving a like on the video. If you've got any other suggestions or any other different methods that you use for nighttime photography, be sure to let me know down in the comments below. If you are new around here, obviously be sure to subscribe to the channel. Go and check out my social media accounts, Twitter and Instagram, where you'll see photos like this. But thank you all for watching, guys. Till next time, goodbye.